The blade was born in silence. Not silence as men understand it, not the hush of vacuum or prayer, but the absolute negation of all lesser thoughts. It was made in the deep vaults beneath Terra, where the fabric of reality was not yet firm and time thin to accommodate genius. The Emperor did not forge the sword with hammer or flame. He willed it into being. There are no blueprints, no surviving schema etched in gold or buried in Martian archives. Even the fabricator locum's deepest cogitators return blank rights when asked to reconstruct its pattern. What little the noosphere can reveal has been redacted by hand, not machine, stripped line by line by an intelligence too precise to leave error. It was not made. It was intended. A finality weapon, spoken into steel by the most absolute psychic will ever housed in mortal form. The chamber where it first took shape was not part of the Imperial Palace. It was beneath even that, deep within the sub-level strata of the proto-vaults, the master of mankind carved for himself in the Unification Wars. Before he became God, he was maker. Before he ruled, he created. And among his creations, the sword was the most intimate. Not a tool of the Primarchs, not an ornament of state, but a personal clause, an if-then blade. If he must kill the gods of old night, then this is how. It is said the blade contains no seams, that its hilt and edge are one contiguous construct. There is no forge marks, no heat scarring, no alignment fractures. The Emperor shaped the blade the same way he shattered the stone men of Pan Pacifica, by thought alone. Every molecule of the Emperor's sword was placed by will, not fire. Not even the black vaults hold material of comparable purity. Its core is unknown, even to Belisarius' call. The Archmagos once confessed, to a vault recorder never meant for broadcast, that when the sword was given to him for safekeeping at the end of the heresy, his autoseer almost shut down in terror. It read the weapon as alive. Not simply resonant, not warp-tainted or psi-reactive. Alive. It pulsed, he said, like a muscle caught in dream. The truth is far worse. The blade is alive, but not as a living thing. It is alive the way flame is alive, always consuming, always seeking the shape of movement. When it first touched the Emperor's palm, it caught fire not from heat, but from proximity. It did not need to be lit. It recognized its wielder and ignited. From that moment, it never dimmed. The fire that cloaks the blade has no fuel. It is not heat, not plasma, not condensed photon agitation. It is memory, burning. The flames are the reflection of the Emperor's hate, not anger, not rage, but the cold, absolute rejection of all that stands against unity. The sword remembers every alien world scoured, every traitor broken, every demigod dismembered. Every strike the Emperor delivered became scripture to the blade. It does not burn like promethium. It does not radiate like warp flame. When it cuts, it leaves no smoke, only scorched absence. Even the edges of its pyrotechnic arcs distort reality, peeling back layers of perception. Witnesses have described it differently. Some saw wings of fire, others geometric fractals. Some saw nothing at all, but screamed as though flayed by light. There is no consistent description, only one constant. When it moves, it is always too fast, and it is always too final. The blade has no name beyond the one given by men. The Emperor's Sword. That title is not a christening. It is a boundary, a linguistic fence thrown up by priests too afraid to catalogue its function. In the private texts of the Custodes, it is referred to by a different term, Lex Talionis Excelsior, the law of supreme reprisal, not a relic, a sentence. During the Great Crusade, the sword remained sheathed most of the time, not out of restraint, but necessity. There were too few things that could survive its edge, and too many that would unmake reality if struck carelessly. Even in battle, the Emperor would rely on other methods: his psychic will, the utterance of his voice, the shattering pressure of his mind. But when he drew the blade, when the sword came free, there were no witnesses left. Only light. Only silence. There are only 3 recorded moments when the Emperor used the sword in full view of loyalist forces. All three are sealed in Class Ultima records. All three include notations warning that prolonged exposure to visual replay may induce recursive nightmare loops and temporary memory dissolution. One entry includes a phrase rarely seen outside of Exterminatus grade clearance. Memetic heat signature, theological, do not replicate. The last of those recordings ends with a note from Malcador the Sigillite, handwritten, 8 words only. Even fire must be chained, and chained again. After the Siege of Terror, when the Emperor was interred upon the Golden Throne, the sword was not left behind. It did not rest in stasis beside the throne. It was taken, removed. Not by custodians or Terror's lords, but by agents of Mars. It was not theft, it was preparation. At the Emperor's final breath before the internment began, his will spoke not in voice, but in knowing. The sword was to be given, but not to a son, not yet. Belisarius Cawl held the blade for over 10,000 years, and he never once touched it barehanded. He encased it in a null-tempered stasis vault beneath Noctis Labyrinthus, layered in void glass and cloaked from even orbital auspex. Not out of reverence, but fear. For in the years after the heresy, when demons raged across the shattered Imperium and the Astronomicon dimmed, the sword began to twitch. Not physically, psychically. Cawl once described it as a coiled thing in dream. It wanted to be drawn. It did not whisper, it did not beg, it waited, like judgment. And then, at the end of the 41st millennium, when the Indomitus dawn rose blood-red and Guilliman awoke upon Macragga, the blade was released, not as inheritance, as obligation. The Emperor's sword was never meant to be passed on, but the Imperium no longer obeys meaning. It obeys survival, and the flame remembers. There is no record of the sword's first victim, no pict feed, no binding script, no autoseer entry scratched into the chronoglass of the Unification Annals. But in the hypogeum vaults of the Scholam Immacula, where scribes recite from memory because parchment cannot survive the psychic resonance of the truth, there is a whisper that the Emperor first drew his blade against something that had no name. Not a man, not a Xenos, not even a god. Something older, something buried, something forgotten because memory itself recoiled. That blade did not cut flesh. It separated presence from time. The strike did not leave blood. It left vacuum, an ontological cavity that could not be filled. When the Emperor struck, the wound echoed across timelines. The victim died in every possible version of its future. This is why the sword must never be misunderstood as a relic. It is not a weapon of war. It is an end state. It was never meant to conquer. It was meant to conclude. During the Great Crusade, the Emperor did not often fight. His presence was catalyst enough. His sons, the Primarchs, were designed to act in his stead. But there were moments when he stepped forward, not to intervene, but to silence. Entire archives were redacted after Monarchia, but fragments remain in Forbidden Cant. The sword was unsheathed not against the word-bearers, but their gods. Not as punishment, as rejection. The same flame that arcs from its blade now, leaping and snapping like a breathing pyre, was there then. But it was not visible to all. Only those already tainted by belief saw it fully. For them, the flame did not resemble fire. It resembled judgment, and it screamed their names as it came. The word-bearers called it the Voice Eater. The Ordo Chronos refers to it as a retrocausal deletion vector. The Sisters of Silence will not speak of it at all. And the Legio Custodes, those few who witnessed the Emperor wield it in wrath, have been known to fall silent for days when asked to recall its sound. One custodian was heard muttering the same phrase, endlessly, before entering voluntary suspension in the vaults beneath the Saturnine Gate. It does not kill, it condemns. During the Horus Heresy, the sword was sheathed until the final day. Even on Moloch, even in the burning of Prospero, even at Beta Garman, the Emperor relied on other means. Words that kill, light that devours thought, psychic blades sharper than reality. But on the vengeful spirit, on the bridge of his son's desecrated flagship, The sword came free. There were no survivors in that room save one. Sanguinius was already dead, his body cooling at Horus's feet. Malcador was gone, his last tether to life snapped in sacrifice. The War Master stood revealed, unmasked, unbound, the full power of the warp throbbing through his veins like molten despair. And for the first time, the Emperor knew that words would not reach his son, not even God words. There was only one path forward, an act of final denial. What followed cannot be verified. Every account contradicts. Some claim the Emperor and Horus duelled for hours, the sword cleaving star patterns into the bridge. Others say the strike came in silence, without even a step forward. One source, the shattered soul of a dying astropath intercepted weeks later, claimed to have seen the Emperor's sword change shape mid-blow, becoming an executioner's axe, a flaming spear, a chain of light. But all agree on one thing. When the sword fell, Horus did not die. He ceased. The Emperor never spoke of the blade again. When he was found, broken, burning, bleeding his mind out in radiation and guilt, he was not holding the sword. It had already been returned, cauterized, rewrapped, sheathed in something stronger than adamantium. The custodes who retrieved it from the ship did so in silence. They did not speak for 3 years after. One blinded himself. One entered the black ships and never emerged. The blade was sealed beneath Mars, not as treasure, as threat. There are accounts, hidden, half insane, of tech priests who attempted to unseal it. One tried to duplicate it using quantum-stabilized adamant cores. The forge detonated within seconds. Another linked it to the Martian noosphere, hoping to read its mind. The data returned from the attempt contained no symbols, only heat. When printed, it incinerated the scribe's face. To this day, only one being has drawn it since the throne was sealed. Roboute Guilliman. When the blade passed from Cole's vault into Guilliman's hands, it did not resist. It did not test him. It did not judge. It recognized. Not blood, not form, but purpose. It flared, not in welcome, in readiness. Guilliman does not wield it the way his father did. The Emperor used it as an absolute. Guilliman uses it as necessity. But the flame answers just the same. In the Indomitus Crusade, it became known simply as the Fireline. Guilliman carved through demon princes and chaos warlords with one strike. Armor did not slow it. Energy fields only accelerated the combustion. One witness swore the blade hummed just before contact, as if savoring the final moment before unmaking its target. It leaves no corpse, only light. In one engagement on Gathalamor, Guilliman used the sword to cleave through a greater demon of Tzeentch, one that had warped the local time field and rendered its own death impossible. The blade did not simply kill it. It destroyed the anchor point the creature used to exist. It was erased in every tense, past, present, future. Records of the battle now show a blank gap in the enemy formation, a hole in causality, as if the demon had never been summoned. But the bodies it killed remain. The blade is not a weapon of slaying. It is a tool of removal. No other being has held the sword and survived. A chaos sorcerer once tried to wrench it from Guilliman's grip using telekinetic force. His body imploded from the backlash. A Necron cryptech attempted to scan it across dimensions. His instruments recorded only the word no before the signal ceased. A Harlequin troop tried to dance around it in mockery. They were dead before their first movement ended. The sword reacted to rhythm itself. Only Guilliman may carry it, not because he is chosen, but because he dares. Even now, the flames remember who once held them, and who they were meant to destroy. There is no ignition mechanism, no power cell, no pyrotechnic filament, no promethium line or warp conduit. The fire that wreathes the Emperor's sword is not flame by any material definition. It is flame only, because that is how the human eye must interpret it: movement without origin, color without light, heat that leaves no ashes. In truth, it is memory, not metaphor, not allegory. The flame is memory made manifest, memories too violent to be contained, too absolute to remain silent. Each flicker is a fragment of judgment past, each tongue a life ended at the tip of inevitability. The sword does not forget, it burns because it remembers. Those who have stood near it describe strange phenomena. Veterans of the Indomitus Crusade have reported disjointed recollections, dreams of battles they never fought, visions of Xenos species that do not exist, the scent of blood boiling on Terran stone that has not felt war in 10,000 years. One Ultramarines lieutenant lost all recollection of his mother's face after standing at parade arms beside Guilliman during a torch-bearing ceremony. When he spoke again, he described in detail the final thoughts of a heresy-era psyker executed for demon speech. He could not have known her name. It had been erased from Imperial record. The fire does not consume the mind. It edits it. It prioritizes what must remain. This is the true cost of proximity, not heat, not pain, displacement. The flames that coil around the Emperor's sword are not elemental. They are epistemic. They change what you know, what you can know, what you should never have known. A Primaris tech marine once attempted to capture a spectral rendering of the fire's emissions. He called the experiment Project Halcyon. The frame-by-frame scan returned unpassable waveform interference, interlaced with 7-second bursts of intelligible script in multiple dialects: Old Gothic, Pythian Martian, ligatured Prosperoan, and the pure code chants of the unspoken vaults. Every line was a confession. Every confession was from a voice long dead. Some of them had never been born. When the scan reached its final resolution, the cogitator refused to shut down. The fire had entered the machine. The tech marine immolated himself beside it and left no remains. His death log was archived under Auram 99. That archive cannot be decrypted, not because it is protected, but because the file cannot be remembered once read. There is no explanation for why the fire behaves this way. No scientific model accounts for it. Cole theorized, without confirmation, that the sword's flame is a sympathetic echo of the Emperor's will at the moment of use. That when he struck Horus, something in that singular act, the magnitude of sacrifice, the utter annihilation of what had been his most beloved creation, created a metaphysical imprint. A scar across reality so deep that it still bleeds light. That scar is the flame, not a fire but a bleeding, and fire was the only form reality could use to interpret it. Those struck by the blade suffer more than physical dismemberment. Their minds vanish ahead of the wound. Battle recordings show that traitor Astartes hit by the sword often stop moving before contact. Their expressions freeze. Their limbs go slack. Some even begin to speak, as if answering a question no one else can hear. And then the fire takes them. Not all who fall to it die screaming. Many die weeping. This has led to heretical speculation in certain Ordo Cogniti enclaves that the blade does not merely kill, it judges. That when Guilliman swings the sword, the flame delivers not just death, but knowledge. It shows its victim something in their final moment. What that something is, no one knows. But the Adeptus Sororitas once recovered the cracked helm of a word-bearer captain whose head was severed cleanly by the sword. Etched on the inside of the faceplate, by hand, after the wound, during the moment of death, was a single word, scratched into the metal with enough pressure to crack ceramite: forgive. The fire does not dim, not in vacuum, not underwater, not in null fields, not even inside the presence of anti-psyker dampening zones. It exists in defiance of natural law. It has been seen burning on both sides of the veil, its arcs recorded by Imperial astropaths as visible from the Imperium. The Black Ships call it a beacon. The Grey Knights refuse to speak of it. There is one report, from the Battle of Dotha Reach, where a demon prince of Slanesh lunged toward the sword and stopped mid-air, not from impact, from paralysis. The flame licked its flesh, and the demon sang, not in pain, in recognition, and then the demon fell, not dead, unborn. No other weapon in Imperial history displays this behavior, not the lion's blade, not the spear of Russ, not the black blade of Vulcan, or the blade and carmine of Sanguinius, All those relics are deadly. All are mythic. All carry lineage and sacred purpose. But only the Emperor's sword burns like remembrance itself, because it alone was wielded not as a weapon, but as a verdict. Some have argued it is not a sword at all, but a shard of the Emperor's psychic essence made stable through his own indomitable will. That the blade is less an object and more a vector, a line of unbroken consequence connecting one act of godhood to all who now suffer beneath it. Carl once admitted this possibility. He called it the only artifact that does not require explanation, because to explain it would make it less than what it is. Guilliman has never spoken of what he feels when he draws the sword, but those near him claim the temperature always drops, not rises, drops, as if the fire consumes not heat, but time. In the halls of the Conclave Discipulus on Ophelia 7, where the canon of martyrdom is etched into crystal, there is one panel, unmarked, sealed in lumen glass, never lit. It is said that this panel contains the name of the last being the sword will ever kill. It has already been written, because the sword is not reactive. It is prophetic. It burns because it already knows the end. And every time it is swung, it asks the same question. Is this the last? So far, the answer has always been no. For 10,000 years, the sword did not move. It did not whisper. It did not shimmer. It did not cry out in grief or triumph. While the Imperium fractured, while terror choked in incense and supplication, while the Arch Mechanicus fleet scoured the stars for lost redoubts of knowledge, the blade remained still. Beneath Mars, beneath flesh, beneath faith. There was no tomb, only containment. The vault in which it was held had no name, no entrance. Not even the Fabricator General of Mars knew its precise location. Only one being carried the coordinates in their mind, carved into synaptic relays too sacred to share and too dangerous to forget. Belisarius Cawl, the architect of Guilliman's resurrection, the breaker of silos, the thief of futures, and the keeper of the last flame. The sword was delivered into his care by the Emperor's own will, spoken not in voice but in sudden knowing, conveyed at the moment of entombment, when the throne drank the last breath of terror's god. The custodes who bore it gave no words. They did not ask permission. They placed the sheathed weapon on Carl's altar and left. He dared not touch it. Instead, he built a vault beneath the crust of Mars itself, beneath the Noctis Labyrinthus, where even the scrap code of ancient wars still howls between data looms. A vault within a vault, sheathed in null gravity counterfields, sonic dead zones, and thought-dampening coils tuned to frequencies older than Mars. The Emperor's sword was not protected from the world was protected from it. Carl did not attempt to unlock the weapon, not for centuries. He studied it only in layers, radiation imprint, chronoresonance, gravitic drift, psychic static bleed. Each scan ended with the same result. The blade responded to nothing, not because it resisted, because it anticipated. The fire within it had already burned through every method Cawl could employ, before the machines were even invented. The Archmagos described it as a cathedral of denial, not dead, not sleeping, watching. On one occasion, he lowered a servo skull toward the hilt, seeking only to measure surface friction. The skull vaporized before contact. No flame touched it. No energy flared. The skull ceased. And for a fraction of a second, the sword hummed. Not in vibration, in thought. The Mechanicus declared the vault forbidden, not by law, by superstition. Skitarii patrols vanished in its proximity. Cog priests assigned to study its architecture descended into paradox loops, reciting tech litanies backward, or dreaming of data streams not yet recorded. One tech adept spoke in full tongues of the dark age of technology before suffering instantaneous brain collapse. There were no experiments after that. The vault was sealed in silence, recorded only in Cowl's personal mind, well under the name Avum Ascendit. Time rises. Yet the sword was not inert. In the wake of the 7th Black Crusade, the flame stirred once. For 9 seconds, Auspex pings across the Martian core registered an unexplained power spike. No origin, no fallout, but the flame was visible, recorded by orbital telescopes not even aligned to the surface. A single arc, like a beacon, traced across the heavens. Karl said nothing, but he moved the vault deeper, and when Cadia fell, the flames stirred again. The rift tore open the galaxy, and the Imperium began to fracture not just in space, but in memory. Entire systems forgot they had ever been part of the Throne World's dominion. Psychic messages returned as screams. Tithes vanished into vacuum. And on Mars, where logic is law, fear grew. Karl knew the flame was waking. He spoke often in private to the sealed weapon, his voice encoded into binary cadence too fast for humans to hear. He asked it questions, not to gain answers, but to feel its presence. What would he say now if he could see this? If I give you away, will you kill him too? Did you weep when you struck your son? No answers came, but the flame pulsed. When Guilliman's stasis field cracked and the Primarch gasped living air, Karl did not hesitate. He retrieved the sword from its final chamber. The fire did not resist him. For the first time in 10,000 years, it did not burn. It dimmed, quietly, as if holding its breath. And when Karl placed the weapon into the hand of the resurrected regent of mankind, it flared. Not in hunger, in recognition. Guilliman said nothing. But the moment he touched the hilt, every lumen in the chamber shattered, not from heat, from pressure. One by one, the Mechanicus present fell to their knees, not from awe, from intrusion. Each of them later reported the same thing. A voice, not Guilliman's, not Karl's, not machine. Something deeper, something final. 4 words. This is not over. From that day, the sword has not returned to silence. It remains drawn more often than not, resting against Guilliman's back, the flame always lit, always burning low. But it is no longer dormant. It arcs when chaos is near. It pulses when lies are spoken. It shrieks when demons breach the veil. And sometimes, when Guilliman dreams, he wakes to find the blade already in his hand. He never draws it in jest, never trains with it, never sheathes it. The blade is not a weapon of readiness. It is a thing of consequence. And in the vault where it once slept, the stone still glows faintly, not from residual heat, from echo, the after-image of prophecy fulfilled. The sword never rested. It waited. He stood surrounded by miracles he did not ask for. The thunder hum of awakening armor, the rise and fall of data looms translating prayers into algorithms, the arcane bellow of power fields clashing against mortal breath, and in his hands, heat, memory, judgment, the sword. Roboute Guilliman did not look like a resurrected war god. He looked like a son who had returned home to find the world shattered in his absence. His expression did not carry triumph. It carried calculus. The blade flared in rhythm with his thoughts. He did not ask for it. Karl had no permission to give. The transfer of the Emperor's sword was not sanctioned by terror, not authorized by the High Lords. It was an act of pure apostasy. And yet, none protested. Because when Guilliman took the blade, Mars stopped. For one breathless moment, the entire red planet went still. Vox traffic failed. Machine priests fell into trance. Orbiting ships forgot where they were. And the flame arced, not in violence, but in consent. The sword had found its wielder, not again, but now. The first time Guilliman used the Emperor's sword, it was not in war. It was in ritual. At the head of the Indomitus Crusade, before the banners were unfurled, before the Primaris legions marched, before the rift's edges had even been measured, Guilliman stood at the Tower of Hegemon on Luna. He held the sword aloft before the Silent Sisterhood, the Custodian Guard, and representatives of every surviving segmentum command. The flame did not flare, it shimmered. And in that shimmer, Psychers saw visions, an Imperium before corruption, a palace without petitioners, a sun that burned clean. Others saw ruin, fire descending from the heavens, a man of fire slaying another in black. One astropath clawed her own eyes out. She saw herself die in every timeline where the blade was drawn. Guilliman said nothing. He did not speak of oaths. He did not promise victory. He lifted the blade. The flame spoke for him. The High Lords of Terror did not approve. They called him usurper, regicide by implication. He had not been named regent. He had taken the title. There was no vote, no ratification. He returned from stasis, accepted the blade, and assumed authority in a single breath. But the High Lords did not remove him, because every attempt to censure Guilliman was met with silence. Vox channels dropped. Missives returned blank. Even the most eloquent orator of the ecclesiarchy forgot the wording of their own accusations when faced with the sword's flame. It did not threaten, it clarified. And Guilliman never used it in the chambers of the administratum. He never needed to. In battle, he became more than a symbol. He became an answer. The Emperor's sword was not a relic in his hands. It was a sentence made steel. When Guilliman led the counter-offensive on the plague moons of Ajax, the sword burned not with heat, but with cleansing light. Nurgle's rot shriveled in its radius. Bubonic engines jammed mid-rhythm. Demon hosts wailed in voices stolen from the past. The blade was not swung wildly. Guilliman fought with cold precision, each strike deliberate, each arc silent. But every time it moved, something impossible occurred. A wound that should have missed did not. A blow meant to glance became fatal. The sword killed not just targets, but moments. It rewrote failure into execution. To the Primaris legions who followed him, the sword became myth. Not symbol, not relic. Myth. It was said the sword knew when to kill, that it moved faster in righteous hands, that it could only be lifted by one who had seen terror burn in their dreams. Recruits whispered that it burned brighter when demons lied, that it vibrated in the presence of warp distortion, as if savouring proximity to contradiction. And Guilliman let them speak. He did not correct them, not because he believed, but because he understood. The Imperium did not require truth, it required anchors, and the sword was now its deepest one. Call's notes during this period are strange, more poetic than mechanical. He referred to Guilliman not as Primarch or Lord Commander, but as the spine returned, and the sword as the unanswerable. He carries it like a weight, not a tool, Call once wrote, as if he knows it will be the last thing he ever holds. It does not burn him, but it does remember him. And memory is not always merciful. The Archmagos did not attempt to reclaim the blade. He feared it too deeply. But he did craft for it a resting sheath, wrought of phase-stabilized adamantium and wrapped in null cloth etched with Martian logic seals. Guilliman never used it. The sword remains drawn. There is one entry from the Codicia Ephemera, written by a Black Templars chaplain during a closed-door war council on Gathalamor. He witnessed Guilliman in private, sharpening the sword with an edge stone from Macraga. It was symbolic. The blade needed no honing. He did not pray, he did not weep, he did not bleed. He spoke to the blade, and I do not know if it answered. But I saw his eyes, and they were not a Primarch's eyes, they were a son's, and he did not want to carry what he carried. Guilliman's ascension is often described in triumphant terms: rebirth, return, rally. But none of these words fit the sword. It is not a weapon of beginning, it is a terminus. And in Guilliman's hands, it is not a symbol of hope. It is a reminder of what must never happen again, and of what still waits to be ended. When the sword strikes, it does not part flesh. It unravels cores. Armor fails before it is touched. Bolter casings liquefy before detonation. Flesh blackens in patterns that resemble script, but no linguist can read them. The blade carves not through mass, but through certainty. To be cut by it is not to die. It is to be declared wrong by a will that predates yours. What is left behind does not rot, does not twitch, does not cry out. There are no last breaths, only silence. Guilliman has never described what he feels when the blade strikes home. He has spoken at length of logistics, of theatre deployments, of doctrinal purity. But not of this. Not of the moment the flame passes through a body and leaves nothing real behind. Others have tried to guess. They watch his grip tighten before a blow, or his breath still in the aftermath. Some say he becomes more than flesh in those moments, something closer to how the Emperor was. Others say the opposite, that Guilliman becomes human again, that the blade steals divinity with each strike, leaving behind only the son who buried his father. What the flame touches, it alters. During the war for Vigilus, a Chaos Sorcerer of the Scourged Legion launched a psychic assault against the Regent's strike team. Guilliman advanced through the storm unfazed. The sorcerer laughed, calling him a puppet, an echo, a false resurrection. Guilliman raised the sword, and the sorcerer began to speak differently. Mid-sentence, his language changed, his voice shifted. He cried out in dialects older than the Great Crusade, begged forgiveness for crimes he could not name, screamed about gates that had not opened yet. Then he combusted. He did not burn. He combusted from the inside. His spine snapped forward and the flames shot out of his mouth in shapes that did not match the pattern of the fire around the blade. Afterward, only one word remained on the floor. Scorched into the plasteel. Revoked. What this proves, if anything, is unclear. There are theories among the Ordo Chronos that the Emperor's sword does not just destroy, it corrects. That each swing is not a battle act, but a timeline reassertion. That the flame functions as a kind of enforced canon, burning away contradictions in the script of reality. If a being is not supposed to exist, the sword erases it. If a decision is not meant to happen, the flame denies it. Some call it divine editorial, others call it death without trial. Guilliman calls it necessary. He has said so only once, during a post-conflict ritual on Nemengast, where the burning of an unclean shrine caused a flame bloom so bright it burned away the shadows of everyone nearby. "We are not chosen," he said. "We are what remains. The sword makes no exceptions." Custodes have studied its arc patterns, Sisters of Battle have written litanies to its heat, Inquisitors have classified its emissions as Class Alpha Nihilum, and still, none understand how it chooses, why the flame leaps when it does, why it waits for some, why it sings to others. There is an account from the defense of Bastia subsector, where Guilliman faced a warp-fused Xenos hybrid that had been twisting the minds of entire PDF regiments. The creature could not be struck. Every blade passed through it, every bullet curved away. Even power weapons sparked uselessly against its skin. Guilliman did not hesitate. He advanced. The sword blazed brighter than any had seen, and the creature stopped moving. Not because of fear, but because it began to fracture. Hairline splits appeared across its skin like cracked porcelain. It whispered, "You are not permitted," and the sword ended it. Some say Guilliman is slowly being shaped by the blade, that its flame leaves marks, not on his flesh, but on his choices, that he acts with more finality now, less mercy, less patience, more verdicts, more absolutes. In his chambers aboard the Macragge's Honor, the blade rests at his side, never hung, never displayed. Tech priests are forbidden from scanning it. No picked capture of its full burn cycle exists. Vox servitors stationed nearby are muted. Recordings fail without cause. Some believe the sword is listening, learning, feeding not on blood, but on belief. Each time it is used, it sharpens, not in edge, in intention. It is unknown whether Guilliman will ever fall. If he does, there are contingency doctrines stored within sealed vaults across Segmentum Solar. Some state the blade must be returned to Mars. Others demand it be cast into the rift. One document, scribed by the last functioning automind of Galadrin Sigma, simply reads, "Do not let it choose again." Because the greatest fear is not that the sword will be lost, it is that it will want another hand, and yet Guilliman holds it still, not with glory, not with pride, but with burden. Every time he draws the blade, the Imperium tightens around him, not in loyalty, in expectation. The sword is a covenant, not a gift, and it demands more than obedience. It demands conclusion. Each swing carries implication, that the Emperor once chose, that Guilliman now acts in that shadow, that soon another choice must be made. And when that day comes, the blade will burn. Not because it must, because it already has. There is a moment after each swing where the fire leans forward. It does not flicker. It inclines toward something unseen, toward a point in space not yet occupied, a breath not yet taken, as though the sword is not finished when it kills, as though it waits, like a question hung between seconds. The aftermath of violence is not silence, it is expectation, and the longer the blade is drawn, the closer it moves to something no one dares name. Among the black ships, there is a creed not recorded in any lexicon. When the sword flares in dream space, the dead gather. This saying emerged not from superstition, but from pattern. Psychers across the Imperium, unrelated, untrained, untainted, have all described a singular dream. A hallway of ash, a man walking with a burning sword. Behind him, the faces of the lost. They do not cry, they do not speak, they follow. And every time the sword is used in truth, not sparring, not display, not ceremony, these dreams proliferate, a measurable increase in psychic echo, as if each swing sends out a pulse, a call, not a call to arms, a call to witness. The ecclesiarchy has responded by issuing new litanies. They do not acknowledge the dreams. They focus on the flame of absolution, the cleansing tongue of imperial will, the ember of the emperor's word made manifest. But even their sermons shift in tone when the sword is drawn. Hymns speed up, rituals shorten, incense is doubled, because they too feel it, the edge of it. On a world called Corinth Delta, where the warp bleed had turned oceans to screaming glass, Guilliman led a detachment of Primaris in breach operations against a corrupted forged shrine. The defenders were not traitors. They were lost. Minds infected by logic viruses, believing themselves the Emperor's thoughts made metal. When the breach failed and the front collapsed, Guilliman advanced alone. The sword did not ignite. It simply appeared, flame coiling up the blade like a reverse collapse, devouring the void. What happened next cannot be described by survivors, because there were none. Only Vox records. The last words heard before blackout. He's not fighting. He's deciding. The chamber was vaporized, not from heat, from revision. Auspex later detected no remains, not of metal, not of gene seed, not even of time. The moment was excised, a blank spot in continuity. Those who tried to record it could not find their quills. Those who viewed it through servo archives found only a static page reading ACCESSIONINVALID. When Guilliman emerged, the sword was silent, dimmed, but not cold. And from that day, the shrine's machine spirit refused to speak, not in defiance, in grief. There is speculation, quiet, forbidden, that the sword now hunts something, that it swings not in reaction, but in progress, that each death is a step toward a final target, a narrowing, a convergence. Some say it is carving away the impossible, others say it is clearing a path. No one agrees what lies at the end, but a pattern emerges. Each time the sword is drawn in fury, warp anomalies lessen. Briefly, no storms, no whispers, no bleed, like a breath held. Then the galaxy exhales again, and the madness resumes, but shorter, shallower. The gap is closing. During a conclave on Nemesis Tessera, an inquisitor of the Ordo Malleus brought forth a theory that the Emperor's sword is not an armament, but an anchor point, that it links the past to the present with such force that the future must align behind it. That reality cannot proceed until it reaches whatever the blade is moving toward. The Inquisitor was found dismembered before dawn. No signs of struggle, no alarm. Only a blood-written phrase on the walls. It is not your burden to guess. Guilliman does not speak of the end. He speaks of plans, of crusades, of reforms, of strategies. But when the sword hums, when it flares on his back without cause, he turns inward. His eyes drift. His voice lowers. He remembers something. Not a place, not a person, a promise. He made it long ago, before resurrection, before fire. And the sword, each time it ignites, reminds him. It is almost time to keep it. The edge is not far. The sword swings faster now. Not in speed, but in event. More often, more moments, each flare closer to the last. The fabric of the Imperium senses it. Battle chants quicken. Ships fail to reach their destination and no one questions it. Whole subsectors enter silence and are not mourned, because the sword burns more often, and every flame is a wound in the future. The sword cannot cut everything. Not because it lacks the power, but because some things are outside its domain. Not immune, excluded, not invincible, irrelevant. During the silent siege of Daedalus Rex, Guilliman faced a foe who did not fight. A philosopher king, twisted by the word-bearer's cursed gospel, who knelt before the Primarch and opened his chest with his own hands. No armor, no demon, no scream, only a whispered question. Will this save them? Guilliman raised the blade, but it did not burn. He lowered it, walked past, said nothing. The philosopher bled out alone, unstruck. Later, in post-action reports, no data spirits registered the sword as active during that engagement. Its presence was marked in the logs, but not its heat signature. When questioned, the Primaris present claimed it had never been drawn. But picked footage shows otherwise. It was out. Literature quiet, waiting. The sword does not answer doubt. There are entities, some human, some not, who walk in absolute uncertainty, who do not know why they exist, who cannot affirm the worth or wrongness of their path. The blade touches them and passes through. No burn, no judgment, no trace. One such case occurred on Iotris Gamma, where a null maiden broke from her cadre and approached Guilliman during a demon purge. She had been disavowed, neither loyal nor apostate. She knelt before him and said nothing. He placed the sword upon her shoulder, and it extinguished. Only when she wept did it reignite. Not in punishment, in understanding. Guilliman did not speak of it again. This is the flaw, or perhaps the design. The sword is not universal. It requires certainty, requires verdict. It is not a seeker of truth. It is the executor of already rendered sentences. In a universe of shifting lies, it is a monolith. But when it meets true paradox, true fracture, it cannot swing, because there is nothing to finish. The Ordo Redactus maintains a sealed record titled The Grayscale Paradox. In it, they catalogue anomalies where the sword failed to manifest its flame. A child covered in the blood of her corrupted mother, yet too young to speak. A battle servitor who believed itself Guilliman, a demon prince who begged to die and thanked the regent for trying. All lived. All disappeared soon after. Some by Guilliman's own order, some without trace. The blade's silence in these moments is not mercy, it is horror. To Guilliman, these absences carry more weight than any battlefield. The flame has become a measure. When it refuses, he does not feel reprieve. He feels exposed, as if, in those moments, the judgment is turned inward. There is an archived transmission from the Librarius of the Silver Blades, recorded but never disseminated. I saw him after one such silence. He stared at the hilt. He was not confused. He was ashamed. The sword had denied him, and in that denial, he saw himself. This log was marked for deletion, but survived in fragments. It ends with static and the phrase, "Who holds the blade when the blade refuses?" There are whispers, buried deep in the Noosphere archives, that the sword once tried to strike the Emperor. Not during the heresy, after, a flicker, a half motion, a recoil. Guilliman had just returned from the throne world, where communion with the Emperor's mind left him half broken. He spoke little afterward, walked the halls of reflection aboard his flagship with the sword always unsheathed. One night, alone, he brought it to the observation deck. The stars recorded a brief blackout. When power returned, the walls bore a single score mark, angled, sharp, deliberate. Not from impact, from hesitation. The blade does not know its master. It obeys, but it does not follow. This is its danger, not in heat, not in cut, in autonomy. It chooses, silently, irrevocably. And sometimes, Guilliman does not know why. There may come a day when the sword is raised and nothing answers, No flare, no burn, no pulse. And that will not mean peace. It will mean there is nothing left to judge. It is said there will come a silence so complete the sword cannot burn, not because it is broken, not because it is lost, but because it is finished. There is a vision preserved by the last functioning astropath of Juno's hollow, a child blind since birth, whose soul was peeled open by the dying scream of a warp-shard leviathan. She saw a battlefield without stars, no banners, no names, just a man standing alone. He held a sword of ash, not dead, not cold, burned out. And the man wept not because he had lost, but because nothing remained that could be saved. The sword did not answer him, because it already had. Guilliman does not speak of endings, but he prepares. His war councils have grown leaner, fewer words, more actions, more contingency operations buried within other campaigns, missions without return protocols, orders sealed until the last moment. There are campaigns where the sword is never drawn, not because it is not needed, but because it is being reserved, like a final breath. There is a record aboard the Macragge's Honour labelled simply Closure. Encrypted, unread. No one but Guilliman has access. It is said the file contains a single command string, executable only once, that will reroute all surviving Astartes vessels toward a singular point in the galactic core. No coordinates, no return. When asked about it during a rare moment of calm, Guilliman said only, "It is not a rally. It is a witness." The sword does not age. Its flame has never flickered with fatigue. Its edge remains as it was the moment the Emperor first lifted it on Terra's soil. Time touches all things in the Imperium, but not the blade. And yet, Guilliman does. Each year he moves slower. Each battle he speaks less. Not because he is weakening, but because the sword weighs more. This weight is not physical, it is temporal, accumulative. Every moment of judgment, every flame, every silence, each is a scar not on flesh but on meaning, and Guilliman is running out of meaning to hold. The sword was made to end wars, but war is all that remains. In the Schola Progenium texts of Hydra 4, there is a forbidden chapter known as the Final Bell. In it, a figure known only as the Last Son carries a sword that no longer burns. He walks through a palace of glass, filled with statues of every soul he failed to save. The last statue is of himself. He does not strike it. He lets it stand, then walks on. The sword has no doctrine, no manual, no succession. When Guilliman falls, when, not if, there is no clear heir, no right, no line of claim, the custodes will not take it. The ecclesiarchy cannot wield it. The Inquisition fears it. Even Caul, who kept it for 10,000 years, will not approach it again. And perhaps that is the answer. Perhaps the blade is not meant to pass on. Perhaps it is meant to vanish. Some believe the sword will shatter the moment Guilliman dies. Others say it will burn until the stars are gone, then wait for new ones to be born. There are even those who believe it is not a weapon at all, but a wound in the shape of one. Carved into history, unhealed, permanent. The final paradox is this: the Emperor's sword is the most powerful weapon in the Imperium, and yet it cannot save it. Only witness its slow collapse, only burn what must not remain, only wait for the last swing. And when that moment comes, when there is no more empire, no more lies, no more war, no more voice. When Guilliman falls to one knee, flame guttering, breath spent, the sword will not mourn, it will remember, and then it will wait again.